Breathe in slowly and let the noise of the day drift away. Tonight, we journey downward into a world untouched by sunlight, where silence holds its own kind of warmth. Beneath the surface of the Pacific, past the shimmer of fish and the quiet hum of the currents, lies the deepest place on Earth, the Challenger Deep. Here, pressure and time shape everything. Here the planet remembers its earliest dreams. We will descend together through layers of light and shadow, meeting the strange and graceful forms that call the abyss their home, creatures made of patience, light that glows without flame, life that endures without sound. Let your thoughts settle like silt on the ocean floor, soft and unhurried, as we listen to the calm rhythm of the earth itself. You are safe, here, weightless, drifting in wonder. A gentle hum, the ocean's broad exhale, welcomes you. We begin by imagining the surface of the sea, beneath a twilight sky, waves softly rolling, draped in half-light. And then slowly, our journey takes us downward, past the day's calm, to the hidden architecture of the planet. At the heart lies the Mariana Trench, a crescent-shaped scar in Earth's crust, formed where the vast Pacific Plate glides beneath the smaller Mariana Plate. Over eons, this tectonic ballet created the deepest cut in the ocean floor, a place where the world folds into itself. We trace this submarine canyon from above the water's surface to its shadowed depths. The trench runs roughly 1580 miles long and averages about 43 miles wide, hugging the eastern flank of the Mariana Island. Picture 2. Colossal slabs of rock, one sinking one, overriding, driving this geological rift deeper and deeper. As the Pacific Plate dives, it drags water and minerals down into the mantle, releasing them to fuel volcanic islands and hydrothermal systems, not unlike the islands above the trench. The trench is therefore alive, not static, a slow-motion site of creation, erosion, and ringed continents. In silence, we feel both the enormity and stillness of this place. Beneath the waves lies a landscape dominated by pressure and time, where the walls plunge downward at steep angles, and where a peak, like Mount Everest, would vanish into blackness if placed there upside down. The crater-like basin stretches in 3 sub-basins, each separated by ridges and sediment-filled slopes. The floor of this undersea canyon is no smooth plain, but a collection of ridges, valleys, and debris fields, shaped by earthquake slides and molten rock. As you imagine drifting above the trench's rim, the ocean's light fades to indigo. The near-surface world softens and gives way to deeper blue. The waters are still warm enough for life at this edge, but below lies an entirely different realm. Here the planet exhales, slowly moving in geological time, millimeters per year, unseen to human eyes, but monumental in effect. The tectonic plates shift invisibly, and what seems still is in truth a pulse measured in millennia. Reflecting on it, you sense not just the physical structure, but the rhythm. The Earth's slow turn, the ocean's patient, sheets of water sliding the mountains being recycled into seafloor. This is not chaos. It is duration. The trench invites us to marvel not at speed, but at persistence. The canyon's walls remind us that time can carve greatness by simply never pausing. Above all, this chapter sets the stage. It anchors our journey in place, quiet, immense, and largely unseen. We prepare now to descend, leaving the realms of light to discover where darkness becomes the norm. And so, as we slip beyond the ridge of the trench and the hum of the surface begins to fade, we carry with us a sense of wonder, curiosity, and calm. The sea below awaits. Imagine you are floating just below the surface, where sunlight still shivers through the waves like a field of liquid glass. Above the air and ocean, trade breaths, each wave exhaling light into the other. The surface flickers in quiet conversation with the sky, now begin to descend. At first, the light clings to you, shimmering ribbons that follow your movements. But as you drift farther, color begins to fade, slowly, gracefully, as if the sea itself is dimming the lamp of the world. Reds are the first to disappear, then oranges, then yellows. By the time you reach 600 feet, only blue remains, a soft ghost of the spectrum that once was. This fading of color marks the boundary of the sunlit zone, or epipelagic realm, the ocean's top layer where life dances freely in light. It extends roughly 200 meters, or about 650 feet beneath the surface. Here, plankton bloom in silent drifts, feeding the fish that glitter like falling coins. Coral reefs rise like living cathedrals. Yet, even here at the edge of day, the light is already fragile, a promise that cannot last. As we sink lower, the sun withdraws. At a depth of about 3,000 feet begins the twilight zone, the mesopelagic. Light still filters down, but weakly broken, and scattered into ghostly beams that fade into indigo haze. No true day ever reaches here. Only a perpetual dusk. The air you imagine breathing would be cool now, if air existed here at all. The temperature has fallen to about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the pressure has multiplied hundreds of times over. Yet the stillness is mesmerizing. Tiny creatures drift past, translucent and calm, their bodies catching the remaining blue rays like shards of glass. This middle layer of the ocean is home to one of nature's quietest wonders, the vertical migration. Every evening, as the sun sinks on the surface world, billions of tiny organisms, shrimp, jellyfish, plankton rise from this twilight to feed near the surface, then descend again before dawn. It is the largest daily migration on Earth, invisible to almost everyone. The ocean, it seems, never truly sleeps. It breathes in and out, rising and sinking with the rhythm of life. Drifting deeper, we enter the midnight zone, or bathypelagic realm. No sunlight has ever touched this place. It begins around 4,000 feet and continues to more than 12,000. The water here is near freezing, just above the point where salt water solidifies. Pressure weighs upon every inch of space with crushing force, hundreds of times greater than at the surface. Yet the sea remains fluid, serene, unwavering. It is strange to think that this darkness is not empty. In fact, it is full of motion, of life, of light made by living things. Bioluminescence begins to bloom around us, faint at first, then everywhere. Tiny organisms release chemical sparks from their bodies, flashes of green and blue light born from the reaction of luciferin and oxygen, guided by enzymes known as luciferase. It is the same chemistry that gives fireflies their glow, but here it serves new purposes. Some creatures use light as camouflage, shining downward with the same hue as the faint light above them, making their outlines vanish to predators below. Others pulse in rhythmic patterns to attract mates or to startle attackers. or even to lure prey toward false beacons. To human eyes, this world would look like a drifting constellation, a galaxy of blue stars scattered through liquid night. Every spark you see, it might whisper, is a heartbeat of survival, a moment of defiance against endless dark. Deeper still in the water's black silence, the sense of time begins to fade. Minutes stretch into something slower, softer. The human mind, built for sunlight, starts to lose its bearings. This is not just physical darkness, it is conceptual. Down here, the measure of a day has no meaning. Only pressure and motion, current and quiet define existence. Passing through 15,000 feet, we enter the abyssal zone, named for the Greek word abyssos, meaning bottomless. The temperature here stays steady, around 35 degrees Fahrenheit, and life moves with deliberate stillness. Sea cucumbers drift like pale clouds across the sea floor. Giant squid pass, long arms trailing through the dark as if writing in invisible ink. The abyss is a world built on patience. Food arrives only from above, the slow rain of marine snow, a constant drizzle of organic particles, dead plankton, and microscopic remains falling from the lit world above. This slow nourishment fuels entire ecosystems. To survive here is to wait to live on the generosity of decay. And yet, life has mastered this waiting. Bacteria convert minerals into energy. Worms tunnel through sediment in search of fragments of carbon. Fish drift with minimal motion to conserve energy. The rules of the surface world's sunlight, speed, abundance are replaced by stillness, economy, and endurance. To descend here is to feel time itself slow down, to sense a kind of eternal pause. At nearly 20,000 feet, we begin to approach the Hadal Zone, the deepest ocean trenches, named after Hades, the mythic realm of the dead. But this is not a place of death. It is a place of equilibrium. The pressure exceeds 16,000 pounds per square inch. Yet the water does not crush itself. It supports. It holds its shape. The weight here is not destruction, it is balance. Creatures in the Hadal world have adapted in ways almost unimaginable. Some produce flexible proteins and special molecules known as piezolites that prevent their cell membranes from collapsing under pressure. Others have evolved bodies without air spaces, no bladders, no cavities, nothing that could be squeezed shut. Their flesh is soft, their bones reduce their movements, slow but sure. Here the narration becomes reflective. Perhaps it suggests there is a lesson in this, that survival is not resistance but surrender. To live in the deep is to yield to pressure, to let it become part of you. Silence grows around us again. We have now traveled through 4 entire realms of the sea, from sunlight to eternal night. Above lies the warm, restless world of storms and life as we know it. Below, something else waits, a region so deep that even light, memory, and time can no longer reach it. This is the entrance to Challenger Deep. From here, the journey becomes more than descent. It becomes transformation. Every layer we have passed through teaches a different kind of patience. The sunlit world teaches movement. The twilight teaches humility. The midnight teaches endurance. And now, the abyss begins to teach silence. Our instruments tremble as the pressure climbs. The surrounding water is ink black and impossibly calm. You can almost hear your heartbeat echo through it, a small reminder of warmth in a world of perfect cold. It is difficult to describe the feeling of absolute darkness. It is not frightening, not anymore. It is a soft, dark, dense, yet gentle, as if the ocean itself were holding you in its arms. The world above fades to memory, sound, smell, and light, all forgotten. What remains is awareness and an immense sense of presence. In this darkness, the voice says quietly, we begin to understand how little we see and how vast the unseen truly is. The final image of this chapter is one of slow motion, glowing flecks of plankton swirling like embers, the faint glint of a descending probe disappearing into endless space, and the long, patient sigh of the ocean that has been waiting for billions of years. Our descent is not over, we have only reached the threshold. Above us, the surface world still turns oblivious to the quiet universe below. Ahead lies the deepest point known to Earth, a valley within the sea, where pressure and silence combine to form a world almost untouched by time. We have followed the light as far as it can go. Beyond this, there is no glow to guide us, only gravity, silence, and the quiet persistence of life. The next step will take us deeper than any sunlight has ever fallen. The hum of the ocean returns slow and low, like the pulse of a sleeping planet. And with that, the story prepares to move onward, past the last photons of light, into the weight and wonder that await in the next chapter, pressure beyond imagination. There is a point far beneath the ocean's surface where numbers lose their meaning. We can measure pressure, yes, roughly 16,000 pounds, pressing upon every square inch of space. But what does that truly feel like? Even the human imagination strains to hold it. Picture standing beneath a mountain of solid stone, and then imagine that mountain moving, flowing, alive. Down here, pressure is not an enemy. It is the fabric of existence itself. It does not strike or crush, it simply is. The water has weight, and that weight shapes everything. Every molecule hums with tension. The ocean at this depth is a different kind of matter, a silent continuum that resists and supports in the same breath. At nearly 36,000 feet below sea level, at the deepest point of the Mariana Trench, this pressure multiplies 1,000-fold compared to what we feel at the surface. The metal of submersibles groans under its grip. Glass windows must be tiny, thicker than a man's arm, perfectly curved to resist implosion. The smallest flaw, a microscopic air bubble trapped in the metal or glass, could fracture under this invisible force. For life here, there is no resisting it. There is only becoming part of it. Creatures of the Hadal zone have learned to live not against pressure, but within it, their bodies structured not like fortresses, but like surrendering waves. If one were to hold a handful of seawater from this depth, one might not recognize it as water at all. It is denser, colder, barely above, freezing around 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and saturated with minerals and dissolved gases. It moves slowly, ponderously, its own inertia, a kind of calm. This water has weight memory and patience. When it slides along the trench walls, it scours the rock with the strength of centuries. And yet, despite all this immense power, the deep ocean is not chaos. It is a cathedral of pressure. And pressure here is the keeper of order. Scientists studying the deep sea often describe it as a world of reversals. What would be fatal above becomes fundamental below. The soft-bodied snailfish, for instance, thrives where other creatures would collapse. Its skeleton is reduced to almost nothing cartilage and jelly instead of bone. Within its cells, special molecules called piezolites protect vital proteins from being deformed by the crushing force of water. These molecules, delicate yet effective, are the quiet architects of survival, allowing life to flourish where physics would seem to forbid it. Even bacteria here have adapted their membranes to remain fluid, preventing the oils and enzymes of life from freezing solid. To human intuition, such survival defies sense, and yet, as we continue to descend in thought, the wonder lies not in resistance but in coexistence. Pressure does not destroy, it transforms. It slows, metabolism shapes, form simplifies design. The creatures of the deep have evolved into poetry, streamlined, soft, and efficient. Each one is a living equation, a perfect balance between form and force. The trench snailfish, discovered in the Mariana system, holds the record as the deepest living vertebrate ever found, dwelling more than 26,000 feet beneath the waves. Its pale body and transparent fins ripple like silk in the darkness. It has no need for pigment or for bones. It moves as though it were a piece of the water itself. The narration slows, its tone dropping to a whisper, and the sound design fades to near silence. You can hear only the faint creak of metal, the steady hum of instruments, and your own pulse. This is the psychological weight of pressure, the awareness that every sound is swallowed, every movement magnified. Scientists who have descended into the trench describe an eerie peace, as though the ocean holds its breath around them. There is no current here, no chaos, no wind. The world above feels like another planet. Inside, a submersible light becomes both shield and companion. The beams stretch into blackness, illuminating clouds of particles that drift like snow. These particles are the remains of the surface world, dust plankton fragments of forgotten life falling endlessly through water. They descend for months, even years, before settling here on the seafloor. This marine snow feeds bacteria and worms, forming the first link in a hidden food chain. Life feeds on memory. Even in the deepest silence, nothing truly vanishes. Everything becomes something else. To engineers, pressure is the enemy of design. To the ocean, it is design itself. Submersibles like the Trieste or James Cameron's Deep-Sea Challenger are built as spheres because a sphere is the only shape that pressure cannot distort. The hulls are made of titanium, a metal both light and strong, polished to perfection to eliminate weakness. Inside, the explorers sit in stillness, surrounded by machinery tested far beyond human endurance. The first descent, made in 1960, lasted less than half an hour at the bottom. But that half hour reshaped our understanding of what life and matter could endure. In that small vessel, as in all future missions, the explorers reported a strange paradox. Though surrounded by crushing pressure, they felt an overwhelming calm. The ocean below does not rage or tremble. It rests in equilibrium. This contradiction, immense force and perfect stillness, is the essence of the deep. Pressure here is not chaos, but containment. It keeps the world intact. If we listen closely, we might realize that pressure is not so different from gravity or time. It is invisible, constant, impartial. It sculpts without sound. The mountains we see on land are held in shape by the same balance of forces that governs the trench below. In this way, pressure is both sculptor and guardian, a reminder that the universe endures not through freedom, but through constraint. The ocean knows this truth intimately. It presses not to punish, but to hold, and what of us, fragile, brief, small? We have learned to measure and observe, but rarely to feel. If we could truly feel the deep ocean's weight, perhaps we would understand patience in a new way. Imagine a world that changes so slowly, it seems still. Imagine a pressure that does not crush, but teaches alignment. Perhaps this is the quiet wisdom of the deep, that endurance is not defiance, but harmony with force. At this depth, even light must obey the law of pressure. Photons that once scattered freely now fade within inches, absorbed by the dense water. Darkness, absolute and perfect, fills every space. But darkness here is not the absence of something. It is the presence of everything else. It is the sea's natural state, a totality of quiet where energy moves unseen, where temperature, chemistry, and gravity meet in balance. Through this invisible order, the trench holds more secrets still, microbes that feed on methane and hydrogen from the crust, sediments older than any mountain chain, minerals that record Earth's magnetic history layer upon patient layer. Each particle tells a story of creation, destruction, and renewal under impossible weight. Scientists retrieve these samples and read them like a diary written in stone and salt, a chronicle of billions of years written at 1 inch per millennium. The further we look, the more we realize that the deep ocean is not merely a place. It is an idea. It is what happens when nature is left undisturbed long enough to become eternal. Pressure is the keeper of that eternity. It has locked away entire ecosystems, entire worlds untouched since before humanity dreamed of navigation. And yet, as our instruments whisper and our lights fade, what we see here is not emptiness. It is possibility. Life still moving. The planet still breathing. Our descent continues, and yet it feels as though we are suspended outside time. Pressure has stilled even thought itself. In this suspension, we sense the heartbeat of Earth, slow, patient, unhurried. It is the same rhythm that beats beneath mountains, glaciers, and tectonic plates. The same rhythm that once raised continents and will one day sink them again. We are nearing the deepest floor of all, the place where Challenger deep curves inward, where gravity pulls every whisper of sediment into the sea's final hollow. Here, pressure becomes something beyond force. It becomes presence. We are within the still heart of the ocean. And as the chapter closes, the narration folds back into silence. The hum of the submersible fades. Only the pulse of the deep remains. The voice lowers to a murmur. In every weight, there is grace. In every depth, a kind of calm. What the ocean carries in silence, the earth remembers in stone. We drift there for a long moment, suspended between awe and peace, before the story begins to turn once more toward what lives inside this quiet empire of pressure. Ahead lies the next revelation, the history of discovery, the moment when humankind first dared to enter this dark cathedral and listen to what it had been whispering all along. Long before machines could dive, before titanium spheres and fiber optic tethers, there were only ropes, lead weights, and the courage to listen to the deep. The story of Challenger Deep begins not with submersibles or screens, but with a wooden ship. In the late 19th century, the HMS Challenger. It was a vessel of sails and steam, designed not for battle or trade, but for curiosity. Between 1872 and 1876, she crossed the oceans on what would become the world's first true scientific. Imagine the decks creaking under the sun, the smell of salt and tar, the slow roll of the ship against a restless Pacific swell. On board were scientists, artists, and sailors-men who lowered miles of rope into the sea with nothing but patience and hope. They used simple-sounding lines, hemp cords, weighted with lead to measure the unseen. It was painstaking work. The lead sinker dropped into darkness, taking hours to fall, then hours more to be pulled back by hand. Every foot of rope came up wet, heavy, and cold. A small conversation with the abyss. Somewhere south of the Mariana Islands, the rope kept falling. It fell longer than it ever had before. When they finally felt the faint tug that meant the lead had touched bottom, they measured the length, nearly 5 miles. The sailors stared at the damp line in awe, as if it were a thread connecting them to another world. That single measurement marked the beginning of a mystery. They had found a place so deep, so far beyond reach, that it seemed to border on infinity. They named it for their ship, the Challenger Deep. The HMS Challenger voyage changed everything. In those 4 years, the crew circumnavigated the globe, taking temperature readings, collecting marine samples, and mapping the contours of the ocean floor. When their findings were published, the world saw the sea not as a flat, featureless plain, but as a vast, rugged landscape filled with valleys, mountains, and hidden trenches. The Earth had depths equal to its heights, and we were only beginning to imagine them. In the decades that followed, technology grew. Weighted lines became wire cables, and later sonar. In the early 20th century, echo sounding allowed scientists to measure depth with sound instead of rope. A single ping, a pulse of sound fired downward, would strike the sea floor and return. By timing the echo, they could calculate distance. It was a revolution. The ocean could now speak in numbers. During these years of discovery, new names appeared: geophysicists, oceanographers, and engineers, whose instruments revealed that the ocean was a living map of motion. Trenches marked where plates collided, ridges showed where they were born. The deep, once thought silent, became evidence of the Earth's constant evolution. Yet even with all this progress, the Challenger Deep remained more rumor than reality. Sound waves told us it was there. Yes, a pit more than 6 miles deep, but no eye had seen it. No machine had touched its floor. The deeper we measured, the more mysterious it seemed. It wasn't until 1960 that anyone dared to go and find out what truly lay beneath. That year, 2 men, Jacques Picard, a Swiss engineer, and Don Walsh, a US Navy lieutenant, descended into the unknown aboard a small white submersible. called the Trieste. Their vessel was unlike any before, a steel sphere suspended beneath a massive float filled with gasoline for buoyancy. The sphere's walls were nearly 5 inches thick, its interior no larger than a closet. Within that capsule, they would ride to the deepest part of the world. On the morning of the 23rd of January 1960, the Trieste was launched into the Pacific waters near Guam. The sea was calm. The men climbed inside, sealed the hatch, and began their descent. For nearly 5 hours, they sank through darkness, past the twilight zone, past the midnight zone, into a realm no human had ever entered. The temperature dropped to just above freezing. The external pressure reached over 1,000 atmospheres, more than 8 tons, pressing upon every square inch of their tiny sphere. Inside, the air was still. They spoke in whispers. The hull creaked like an old ship in ice. At one point, they heard a loud crack. One of the outer acrylic windows had fractured under stress. They paused, hearts pounding, but the structure held. There was nowhere to go but down. At last, after a descent of nearly 7 miles, the Trieste touched the seafloor. The landing stirred up a cloud of fine sediment that swirled around their viewing window, erasing the outside world for a moment. When it cleared, they saw the bottom of the earth, a pale, flat plain of silt. And then, something extraordinary, a small creature moved. Picard described it as a flatfish, though later, scientists believe it may have been a type of sea cucumber or amphipod. Whatever it was alive. They had found life at the bottom of the world. The men stayed for just 20 minutes before beginning their long ascent. When they returned to the surface, the Trieste was greeted by cheers and disbelief. No one had thought it possible. Newspapers called it a journey to the center of the earth. Yet Picard and Walsh spoke not of fear or triumph, but of quiet awe. It was peaceful, Picard said later, like a graveyard but full of life. For more than half a century afterward, no human returned to Challenger Deep. The place remained almost mythical, too deep, too remote, too dangerous. But technology did not stop evolving. Robotic probes and autonomous landers were built to go where humans could not. Each one sent back images of a world unlike any other amphipods, the size of small fish, ghostly snailfish, with translucent bodies and microbial mats feeding on minerals in the sediment. The deep was no longer a mystery of absence. It was a kingdom of subtle abundance. In 2012, filmmaker and explorer James Cameron built the Deep-Sea Challenger, a lime green submersible engineered to withstand the crushing depths. He descended alone, filming and sampling as he went. When he reached the bottom, he found the same vast stillness. Picard had described a silence so total it seemed sacred. He described it later as a completely alien world, but a peaceful one. The history of discovery, from rope to sonar to steel and light, is really the story of human patience. The ocean has always asked us to wait. It yields its secrets, only in whispers, never in rushes. Each descent, whether by wooden ship or modern machine, has been a small act of faith, a gesture toward understanding that the world is deeper, quieter, and more complex than we imagine. Today, instruments measure the depth of Challenger Deep at nearly 3,600 feet. We can map its contours, identify its ridges and slopes, even measure the temperature of its sediments. Yet for all our knowledge, the trench retains its mystery. It remains a place of paradox, a site of immense pressure and utter calm of eternal night that shelters the oldest light of life. The waves above roll on unchanged, as they have for billions of years. The trench remains below timeless, vast, unhurried. And between them, between motion and rest, sound and silence, drifts humanity listening. There comes a moment in every era when curiosity outweighs fear, when the need to know pushes humanity beyond the limits of comfort and light. In January of 1960, that moment arrived in the still waters of the Western Pacific. A white submersible named Trieste floated quietly above the Mariana Trench, tethered only to gravity and the dreams of two men who dared to follow it into silence. The morning was windless. The ocean's surface looked like polished glass, reflecting a sky so pale it seemed almost weightless. On deck, a small crew moved methodically, checking cables, tightening valves, securing bolts. And at the heart of this careful ritual stood Jacques Picard, a Swiss engineer and dreamer, and Don Walsh, a young US Navy lieutenant. Together, they were about to attempt what no human had ever done before, to descend nearly 7 miles beneath the sea, into a world that had existed unseen since the dawn of time. The Trieste itself was an improbable creation, a strange bulbous machine that looked more like a floating lantern than a ship. Its design was simple in theory, elegant in physics, and radical in courage. The vessel's upper structure was a long, slender float, filled with gasoline, lighter than water, impervious to compression. Suspended beneath it was a steel sphere, barely 7 feet across the pressure capsule, where the two men would sit. The walls were 5 inches thick, forged from the purest steel ever produced, designed to endure 1,000 times the pressure of the surface world. The sphere had 2 small windows, each only 5 inches wide, tiny portals through which humanity would first gaze upon the bottom of the earth. When the hatch was sealed and the bolts locked, the world outside became distant, muffled, and eternal. Inside, there was only dim red light and the sound of breath. The Trieste began to sink slowly, almost reluctantly at first, as ballast was released and gravity took hold. Gasoline made the vessel buoyant. Iron pellets stored in release hoppers made it sink. Once the descent began, there was no turning back until they reached the bottom. The first 100 feet passed quickly, sunlight still flickering through the water like a restless mirage. But soon, the light dimmed. Blue deepened to indigo, then to black. Minutes became hours. The descent through the upper ocean was smooth, though the pressure outside increased relentlessly. 500, 1,000, 2,000 pounds per square inch. The sphere creaked and moaned softly, like an old tree bending under wind. At 3,000 feet, they passed through the twilight zone, where the last stray rays of sunlight gave up their struggle. At 5,000, they entered total darkness. The temperature fell toward freezing. Condensation formed on the inner walls, dripping in slow rhythm, marking time, in a world where clocks meant nothing. Picard and Walsh spoke rarely. Their words floated between them like small bubbles rising and vanishing in the quiet. Most of the time, they simply listened to the hum of the instruments, to the occasional faint metallic groan, to their own heartbeats. At around 9,000 feet, they released more ballast. The Trieste continued its slow descent now at a rate of about 3 feet per second. The outside world was utterly dark, yet their viewports glowed faintly from the reflected light of their lamps. Small shapes drifted past translucent creatures, flickering softly as if made of glass and breath. Some emitted their own light, brief blue sparks against the black. Life, even here. At about 30,000 feet, something happened. A sharp cracking sound echoed through the cabin, a deep, sudden thud that made the walls shiver. The two men froze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. It was one of the small acrylic windows, its outer layer fracturing under stress. The crack did not spread, but the sound remained in their memory, the ocean, reminding them of where they were. Still, they continued downward. There was no fear in their movements now, only concentration. Both knew that the human body could not survive a single flaw in their steel sphere. At this depth, even the smallest leak would be fatal. Yet they also knew that this moment, this descent, was history unfolding in real time. After nearly 5 hours, the Trieste finally touched bottom. The descent had ended. They were now more than 35,800 feet beneath the surface, deeper than any human had ever gone. The landing stirred up a cloud of fine sediment, a blizzard of silt that swirled outside their small windows, erasing everything from view. For several minutes, they could see nothing. The ocean was not simply dark, it was opaque. The silt drifted like smoke in zero gravity, each particle moving with infinite patience. When the cloud finally settled, the world outside was revealed a flat, pale seafloor, stretching in every direction, featureless and calm. No rocks, no coral, no plants, just fine gray mud, smooth as silk and soft as breath. Then, something moved. A small, slender shape glided across the beam of light, pale, almost white, like a living shadow. Picard leaned closer, heart quickening. "Did you see that?" he whispered. Walsh nodded. It was alive. Some later thought it might have been a flatfish, others a sea cucumber or amphipod, but the truth hardly mattered. It was life, delicate, improbable, undeniable. Even here, under 8 tons of pressure per square inch, something lived. For 20 minutes, the Trieste remained at the bottom. Picard and Walsh made notes, observed and listened. The hull creaked softly, a slow heartbeat of steel. They switched off their lights for a moment, and the darkness returned, like a wave, total, infinite embracing. There was no up or down, no sound, no sense of movement, only the faint rhythm of the submersible systems and their own breathing. Picard later described the moment as one of profound peace. It was like a dream, he said. No turbulence, no movement, just silence and eternal quiet, like being in the heart of the earth. In that silence, they realized something extraordinary. The deep was not hostile. It was serene. It was not chaos, but stillness. The trench was not a grave. It was a womb. When the time came to ascend, they released their ballast. The iron pellets fell into the mud, and slowly, the Trieste began to rise. The return journey took nearly 4 hours. As they rose through the black, through the twilight, through the thinning blue sunlight, began to creep back into their world. By the time they broke the surface, the ocean was calm again. The mission was complete. Humanity had reached the deepest known place on Earth. News of the descent spread quickly. Headlines called it the final frontier of Earth, a phrase soon borrowed for space. The Trieste's success marked not only a triumph of engineering, but a triumph of patience, the culmination of centuries of wonder. But for Pickard and Walsh, the journey was not one of conquest. It was an act of communion. They had entered the deep, not to dominate it, but to listen. In later interviews, both men spoke of a shared feeling that lingered long after the dive, a kind of reverence for what they had seen. They described the deep as peaceful, holy, eternal. It was not frightening, only humbling. Walsh once said, "The sea does not change for us. It is we who change when we go there." The Trieste now rests in a museum, silent once more. Its steel sphere, though small, remains one of humanity's greatest thresholds, a door between the known and the unknown, between light and pressure, between breath and silence. Every modern submersible, every robotic probe that has followed, owes its existence to that small, cramped chamber and the two men who dared to enter it. And somewhere below in the darkness, they once visited, the seafloor remains untouched, the fine grey sediment still waiting, the small unseen lives still moving in eternal patience. The ocean remembers. It holds everything that ever descended into it, ships, creatures, and dreams alike. The soundscape fades to a low hum, a slow pulse like a heartbeat beneath miles of water. The descent of the Trieste ends, but the story does not. Ahead lies the true mystery, what fills that darkness, and how life has learned not only to survive, but to flourish there. As the chapter closes, the camera of imagination tilts downward once more, returning to the deep's unbroken black. Something moves within it, faint, glowing alive. The light drifts, then fades. The voice returns, barely a whisper. Let us go deeper, still beyond the memory of steel, into the living darkness itself. Beneath the last reach of sunlight, below the trench's rim, where even steel sighs under its own weight, life continues, soft, glowing, unhurried. The Trieste has risen and returned to history, but the realm it briefly touched still stirs with invisible motion. We are now guests in the oldest world on Earth, the living darkness. It is easy to think of this place as empty, but emptiness here is an illusion born of light. In truth, every cubic foot of water hums with life. In the Hadal Zone depths, below 20,000 feet, organisms have learned not to resist the dark, but to weave themselves into it. The blackness is not a void, but a fabric, and each creature is a shining thread in its design. If we were to drift quietly through this realm, we would see a glow in the distance, faint like a candle behind glass. Draw closer, and the source reveals itself, a cluster of amphipods, shrimp-like crustaceans, their bodies nearly transparent, their movements gentle as snowfall. These tiny scavengers feed on what drifts down from the upper layers, the marine snow, that constant rain of organic memory falling from the living world above. Each particle is a story, a fragment of algae, a flake of plankton, the dust of once bright life, now sustaining the dark. Their meal is not waste, but transformation. Down here, nothing is lost. Everything becomes something else. The deep is an ecosystem of recycling patience and quiet precision. To live here is to belong fully to the rhythm of decay and renewal. Some creatures, like the ghostly snailfish, glide effortlessly among the sediments. Scientists have found them thriving at depths beyond 26,000 feet, the deepest living vertebrates known. Their bodies are delicate and fluid, without scales, or pigment, their bones soft as jelly, their skin translucent as fog. They are not built to fight the weight of the ocean. They are built to flow with it. Their organs, their very molecules, are designed to yield, not resist. They embody a philosophy written into biology that survival in the deepest sense is a form of surrender. Close by, microscopic bacteria form carpets of colorless life across the seafloor. They feed not on sunlight, but on chemical whispers rising from the earth itself: hydrogen, methane, ammonia. These are the chemosynthetic organisms, creatures that turn minerals into energy, writing the laws of metabolism anew. To them, sunlight is irrelevant. Their world burns with chemistry. They are among the most ancient beings alive, descended from forms that existed billions of years before trees, or animals perhaps even before oxygen filled the air. And then deeper still, we find the amphipods of Challenger, deep, small, transparent crustaceans that drift in the Hadal water like fragments of glass. In 2014, scientists retrieved them in specialized traps and found something unexpected inside their bodies. Microplastic fibers, tiny remnants of human civilization. Even here, where no sunlight shines, the fingerprints of the surface world have arrived. It is a sobering reminder that the ocean's unity is complete. There are no walls between worlds, only gradients of depth and time. Yet, despite the intrusion of our age, the deep endures unchanged. Evolution has sculpted creatures to match its patience. Some have bodies so soft they collapse when brought to the surface. Others disintegrate in minutes because the loss of pressure breaks their chemistry apart. These lives are born of a balance between weight and water, existing perfectly only in one place, a niche defined by force. Bioluminescence here is not decoration. It is language. The darkness is full of communication, though silent to our ears. Small flashes appear and vanish. In the distance, signals, warnings, invitations. A flash to attract a mate. A pulse to startle a predator. A soft glow to lure prey closer. The patterns are specific to each species, as distinct as the songs of birds above the waves. To the creatures of the abyss, light is speech. Some fish, like the anglerfish, carry lanterns of living bacteria attached to their bodies. A soft blue-green light drifts from a dangling lure that sways before its mouth. The fish waits motionless, its body blending into the black, until an unsuspecting traveler approaches the glow, drawn to what seems like hope. Then, with a slow grace, jaws close, and the light goes out. In the deep, beauty and hunger are the same thing. The narration softens the rhythm, becoming almost hypnotic now, as if the listener too is suspended in this black cathedral of life. Every light you see, it whispers, is a heartbeat in darkness. A reminder that even where nothing seems to live, something always listens. The deep ocean's creatures are slow, not because they are weak, but because they are timeless. Movement consumes energy, and in this world, energy is everything. A single meal may sustain a creature for weeks, sometimes months. Every gesture is deliberate, every breath measured. Their hearts beat slowly, their lives stretch long. Some deep-sea corals can live for thousands of years, growing just a fraction of an inch each season. Time here is not a river, but a tide, moving back and forth in cycles of patience. And yet, for all its peace, the abyss is not static. It is shaped by forces beyond sight, earthquakes rumbling through the crust, sediments sliding down canyon walls, minerals seeping from hydrothermal vents. These vents are like underwater furnaces, places where molten rock meets seawater, releasing plumes of heat and chemicals that nourish entire colonies of life. Around these openings, giant tube worms grow taller than a person, their bodies home to symbiotic bacteria that convert sulfur into sustenance. It is a world built on the energy of the planet itself, a living reminder that life can begin anywhere. Conditions allow balance even in darkness, even in fire. Modern instruments have revealed even more wonders. Hadal amphipods carrying enzymes unlike any found elsewhere, microbes capable of breaking down toxic compounds, snailfish eggs clinging to rock crevices miles beneath the surface. Each discovery adds to a growing realization: the trench is not barren, but rich, beyond imagination. Its life forms are not rare anomalies. They are the Earth's most enduring pattern, thriving quietly, while surface civilizations rise and fall. At these depths, color has no meaning. There is only texture, motion, and glow. The animals here are soft, often gelatinous, their forms simplified by evolution into elegance. The deeper one looks, the less familiar life becomes, and yet somehow it still feels connected, a distant echo of our own biology, shaped by the same laws, following the same hunger to exist. And perhaps that is the quiet truth of the deep: life is not fragile. It is adaptable. It changes shape, pace, and chemistry, but it does not fade. Even under mountains of water, even in silence, life continues to write itself across the darkness. In the living darkness, time feels circular. A particle falls, a creature feeds another, drifts by to carry its remains. Every act feeds another, and nothing is wasted. The ocean keeps its own economy of grace. To watch it is to see how balance, not abundance, sustains the world. The camera of imagination pans slowly over the seafloor, luminous trails of plankton, the slow pulse of an anemone, the soft drift of sediment over ancient bone. In every frame, there is movement, but no rush. This is not a place of silence, but of harmony. We have reached the point where mystery becomes intimacy. The dark is no longer foreign. It feels familiar, comforting, infinite. The ocean's deepest places are not emptiness, but reflection mirrors of our own inner quiet. The voice returns barely more than a breath. What we call darkness is only another kind of light, one that shines inward. And so, in the stillness, surrounded by glowing threads of life, and the slow exhale of the sea, we prepare to look upward again, toward the humans who came later, the new explorers who return to listen to, learn to see what the Trieste could not. The next chapter will follow those travelers, the modern voyagers, the seekers who dive again into the abyss, armed with new machines, but guided by the same ancient wonder. Half a century after the Trieste returned to sunlight, the deep still called, silent patient, unchanged. The trench weighted its walls, as sheer and solemn as ever, its floor holding the same fine silt that had risen briefly in the floodlights of 1960. The world above had transformed satellites, mapped the globe, computers shrank from rooms to pockets, and human footprints dotted the moon. But down here, in the quiet beyond reach, little had altered. The ocean remained unvisited, the deepest frontier on Earth, its stories unspoken. For decades, the descent of Picard and Walsh was treated as the closing chapter of an age of exploration. Humanity had touched bottom, or so it seemed, and moved on to other heavens. Yet the sea is not a chapter to be closed. It is a book that rewrites itself. And in the early years of the 21st century, curiosity began to stir again. Technology had evolved into precision cameras that could see without light sensors, that could survive 1,000 atmospheres and materials that refused to yield. The dream of returning to the deep grew feasible once more. Among those who listened was a filmmaker whose eyes had long gazed at other worlds, James Cameron. Known for creating cinematic oceans on screen, he turned his attention to the real one, determined not just to imagine the abyss, but to meet it. In 2012, Cameron's deep-sea Challenger rolled toward the Pacific on a ship called the Mermaid Sapphire. The vessel looked almost fragile, a tall lime-green tower standing upright on deck, but its simplicity was deceptive. Every bolt, every circuit, every plate of its titanium hull had been tested to withstand pressures exceeding those of Challenger Deep itself. The submersible's capsule was a perfect cylinder barely wider than a man's shoulders, fitted with cameras, sensors, and robotic arms. Inside it, there would be no room to stand, hardly space to stretch. Cameron would dive alone. On the morning of March 26, the ocean was calm. A gray horizon stretched endlessly in every direction. The crew watched as the submersible was hoisted from the deck, cradled by a steel frame, and lowered into the water. For a moment, it bobbed there, rocking gently, a speck of human effort above the vast Pacific. Then, ballast released, it began its descent. Inside, Cameron watched numbers climb as depth increased. 1,000 feet, 5,000, 10,000. The light dimmed and then vanished. He drifted into blackness, guided only by the glow of his instruments. Communication with the surface grew faint, distorted by the sheer volume of water. And still he sank past the midnight zone, past the realm where the Trieste had once fallen silent. At 25,000 feet, he looked out through a small acrylic viewport and saw particles falling like snow. At 35,000, pressure outside reached over 16,000 pounds per square inch, more than enough to crush any unprotected metal. Yet inside, there was calm. The capsule groaned softly, a deep, metallic hum, steady as a heartbeat. At the bottom, Cameron's floodlights flickered to life, and for the first time in half a century, light touched the floor of Challenger Deep. The world revealed was one of quiet, wonder-pale mud plains, dotted with tiny tracks, small mounds and ripples etched by ancient currents. There were no monsters, no ruins, no chaos, only a kind of immaculate stillness. A shrimp-like creature darted past the window, translucent and calm. Everything here moved as if time itself had slowed. He spent nearly 3 hours alone at the bottom, recording, sampling, observing. His voice, transmitted faintly to the surface, carried not excitement but awe. "It's lunar down here," he said. When he rose again, breaking through the surface light after 7 hours, the sky was brighter, the sea unchanged, and yet something fundamental had shifted. Humanity had returned. The abyss was no longer a singular memory. It was a living conversation renewed. But even this was only the beginning. The deep was far too vast for one descent, and the ocean too patient to be hurried. Other explorers would follow, armed with new machines and deeper resolve. Among them was Victor Vescovo, a former naval officer pilot and lifelong explorer. Between 2018 and 2019, his submersible, the limiting factor, descended repeatedly into the world's deepest trenches, including the Mariana. Unlike earlier craft, the limiting factor was built for repetition, not singular glory. It could dive again and again, its titanium sphere enduring pressure that would destroy most materials with ease. For the first time, the deep was not merely visited, but studied systematically. Vescovo's missions charted terrain, never seen by human eyes, scarps, ridges, and valleys sculpted by ancient forces. Robotic arms collected samples, cameras recorded creatures in motion, and instruments captured data about temperature, salinity, and chemistry. He found amphipods, snailfish, and microbial mats, thriving where logic suggested emptiness. He also found evidence of human presence, small scraps of plastic resting quietly on the seafloor, reminders that no corner of Earth remains untouched by our shadow. Still, the mood of these expeditions was not despair, but humility. Every descent revealed more life, more adaptation, more endurance. The ocean did not appear fragile. It appeared infinite. Its silence was not void, but resilience. In interviews, Vescovo spoke of the deep not as a hostile wilderness, but as a cathedral. "It's the most peaceful place I've ever been," he said. Absolute darkness, absolute stillness. You feel the immensity of the planet pressing gently around you. It's like being inside its heartbeat. Meanwhile, unmanned probes and remote vehicles continued the exploration. Japan's Kaiko reached nearly 36,000 feet in 1995. China's Fenduje touched the trench floor in 2020. Robotic landers from the United States and the United Kingdom returned with images of gelatinous creatures, shifting sands, and mineral plumes rising from unseen vents. Each new mission added another note to the deep's quiet symphony. Science, too, evolved. Oceanographers began to study not only the biology of the trench, but its geology and chemistry, the way it recycles the Earth's crust. The subducting Pacific plate drags water and sediment miles into the mantle, where they melt and re-emerge through volcanic chains far above. In this slow motion exchange the planet breathes. The trench, once seen as an abyss, is in truth a lung. Modern technology allowed us to hear the deep for the first time. Sensitive hydrophones placed miles below the surface captured the sounds of earthquakes' whale songs echoing through the trench walls, and even the distant rumble of typhoons far above. The deep ocean is not silent, it hums with the memory of the world. And yet, despite all this progress, every explorer returns with the same feeling that Picard once described: humility. For all our instruments, for all our maps and models, the deep remains largely unknown. More people have walked on the moon than have seen the floor of Challenger Deep. The ratio of exploration to mystery is laughably small, and perhaps that is the beauty of it. The narration fades to a murmur, now calm and infinite. We have returned to the place where light cannot follow the voice whispers, but this time we bring our own, and still the darkness teaches us more than illumination ever could. Ahead lies the next frontier, not of technology, but of perception. To understand the deep fully, we must learn its language, not of words or light, but of rhythm, of pressure, of sound. And so, as this chapter ends, the story tilts gently toward that stiller realm, where meaning is carried not in speech, but in vibration, and where the deepest truths are heard, not seen. Sound travels differently in water. It is slower than light, but surer, denser, infinitely more patient. In the deep ocean, where light cannot live, sound becomes everything. Sight, touch, memory, and time. It ripples through the world like thought itself, carrying messages across distances no creature could ever swim. Down here, in this immense cathedral of pressure and stillness, the ocean speaks in vibrations, and every being knows the tone. Imagine it now, a vast space of water so thick with weight that silence feels physical. Yet within that silence, something moves. A low hum drifts through the trench, the song of a fin whale, its call deep enough to vibrate the bones. Each note travels for hundreds of miles, curling along layers of water that bend and carry it like a whisper in a cave. The whale cannot see its kin, but it hears them. Sound becomes the map by which life navigates the dark. In the upper ocean, sound is broken by chaos, by surf, and wind, by ships and storms. But below 6,000 feet, those noises fade. The surface roar dissolves into a slow pulse. Here, the Earth's natural voice emerges. Hydrophones placed at the bottom of the Pacific have recorded sounds that move like continents. The rumble of undersea earthquakes, the distant crack of glaciers, breaking far away, the faint roll of volcanic vents, releasing bubbles from the crust. Even typhoons have an echo this deep, their surface fury turned to soft thunder in the abyss. To descend into this stillness is to enter the world's oldest conversation. Every movement leaves a signature, every creature its note. Shrimp crackle faintly, the pop of their claws, like static in the sea's great radio. Sperm whales speak in click sequences so complex they resemble code. Their calls can be heard across entire ocean basins. To them, sound is not just communication. It is presence, a way of being known. The deep ocean, though dark, is far from silent. It is a symphony without audience, a layered hum that never ceases. And yet the frequencies we humans can hear are only a fraction of the whole. Below the threshold of our ears lies a deeper register, infrasound waves so long they can circle the planet. These vibrations move through the water, through the crust, even through our bodies. We may not notice them consciously, but we feel them in our bones, in the quiet tremors that sometimes stir beneath the edge of perception. This is the true language of the deep, not words, not images, but resonance. Everything that exists here must learn to speak in vibration. Even the smallest organism, the faintest current, participates in the dialogue. A fish swims and leaves a ripple. A worm moves and sends a whisper through the sediment. Each signal carries meaning. Over millions of years, evolution has tuned these exchanges into precision. The anglerfish detects the movement of prey through pressure, changes no larger than a heartbeat. The oarfish can sense vibrations from miles away. Some deep-sea sharks possess electroreceptors that allow them to feel the pulse of living cells in complete darkness. Their senses are not diminished by the absence of light, they are expanded by it. In darkness, awareness becomes pure. To study this world, scientists send down recorders that drift like listening ghosts. These small autonomous instruments sink to the seafloor, unfurl their microphones, and wait. For months, sometimes years, they do nothing but listen. When they return to the surface, they bring back the soundscape of the planet, a slow, endless song that no human has ever truly heard in real time. Some of what they capture is astonishing. There are chirps and creaks, booms and sighs, pulses that repeat in cycles of days or weeks. Some patterns match known creatures, whales, dolphins, fish. Others remain unidentified, belonging perhaps to species still undiscovered. The ocean still hides voices we have not yet named. Even the seafloor itself speaks. Under extreme pressure, rock layers shift and grind, creating subsonic murmurs. These geologic voices are the pulse of the planet, proof that even in its deepest sleep, Earth moves. To hear them is to listen to time itself, slow and inexorable. There is something profoundly human in this realization. We too are shaped by sound, by heartbeat, by breath, by the faint inner hum of life itself. In our earliest form, before sight or thought, we know vibration. In the womb, before we are born, we hear. The deep ocean in this way is not alien at all. It is ancestral. If light tells stories through vision, sound tells them through presence. In the deep, the distance between things is measured not by space, but by echo. To call is to reveal where you are, to risk being known. Every creature here must choose how to speak, how loudly, how often. Too much noise draws danger. Too little invites isolation. Survival is a balance of resonance and restraint. And so the living world below has evolved its own etiquette, a harmony of necessity. Whales sing low to carry far. Squid flash brief pulses of bioluminescence in sync with the rhythms of sound. Even bacteria respond to vibration, clustering and dispersing in response to frequency shifts. The ocean listens to itself endlessly. Modern technology, for all its precision, can only imitate this language imperfectly. Our sonar pings echo rudely through the water, stark and mechanical compared to the ocean's subtle tones. Some marine animals grow confused by our signals, their navigation disrupted by frequencies never meant for their world. Scientists now strive to soften our intrusion, to listen rather than shout, to let the ocean speak first. There is a lesson here, gentle but immense. The true understanding comes not from imposing noise, but from attending to silence. The deep ocean's quiet teaches us how to hear again, not just with ears, but with patience. In that moment, the scene widens, the camera of imagination moving through endless black over ridges and valleys unseen by any light. The soundscape builds faint, clicks distant songs, the tremor of rock beneath sediment. The ocean is alive, endlessly conversing with itself. Every tone connects to another, every echo returns changed. And within that conversation, we find reflection. The frequencies of the deep mirror the human heart, steady, resonant, and searching. When we listen, truly listen, we are no longer separate from the sea. We are part of its chorus, vibrating in unison with the pulse of the planet. We have learned the ocean's language, not through words, but through waiting. And as this chapter ends, the story turns once more toward vision, the lights that bloom in the darkness, the soft lanterns of life that shimmer like constellations beneath the sea. The next chapter drifts toward those quiet fires, the lanterns in the dark, where life speaks in light and the abyss itself becomes a galaxy. Far below the waves in the kingdom of silence, something begins to glow. A slow pulse at first, faint as breath, then another, then many small living lights flickering in the endless dark. It is as though the stars have slipped beneath the surface, finding new orbits in the coldest water on Earth. Each spark is a creature's voice, a conversation in color. Here in the deep, where light cannot survive, life has learned to make its own. Bioluminescence is one of the ocean's oldest magics, a chemistry of wonder, precise and eternal. Its glow is not fire, not electricity, but a quiet reaction between luciferin, a light-producing molecule, and oxygen, guided by enzymes called luciferase. This process releases pure energy in the form of cold light, without heat light meant only to be seen. Unlike the burning stars of the surface world, this glow is gentle, efficient, and alive. Imagine yourself suspended here, weightless, watching this silent constellation unfold. The sea is dark, but not empty. All around, soft flares rise and fade like slow fireflies. Some hover in swirls of blue and green. Others blink rhythmically like heartbeat signals in the water. It is not chaos. It is language patterns evolved over millions of years. Each blink, each flicker, each soft halo of light has a meaning. The most delicate among these performers are the dinoflagellates, microscopic plankton that drift near the surface layers of the twilight sea. When disturbed by a passing wave, by a fish's fin, or even by a diver's motion, they flash with a sudden burst of blue. It is a defensive act, a startle reflex written in light. At night, whole bays can shimmer from their combined glow, a slow aurora rippling across the tide. Even the ocean's smallest lives carry the memory of the stars. Farther down, the glow becomes rarer, but more purposeful. Jellyfish undulate with ribbons of emerald light running along their bells. Comb jellies flicker like glass rainbows, their translucent bodies refracting their own radiance. Some creatures use light as camouflage, illuminating their undersides, so that predators below cannot see their shadow against the faint blue glow filtering from above, a survival art known as counter-illumination. To the trained eye, this is an ocean of secrets, where invisibility itself is achieved by brilliance. Then comes the lanternfish, perhaps the ocean's most abundant bearer of light. These small silver blue fish migrate daily through thousands of feet of water, rising toward the surface each night and sinking again before dawn. Along their bellies and flanks run rows of luminous organs, tiny biological lamps that glow softly in the dark. Each pattern is unique, like a fingerprint, identifying individuals, attracting mates, confusing predators. The light they emit is subtle, a dim, steady gleam, tuned to the surrounding darkness. They do not blind or dazzle. They belong to the dark and honor its calm. Deeper still drifts the dragonfish, a predator draped in midnight black, armed with long fangs and a single barbel, a lure dangling from its chin. At the tip burns a ghostly green light. The dragonfish's prey, drawn to the glow, approaches slowly, hypnotized by the faint shimmer. And in that moment of fascination, the jaws close and the light disappears. Even here, in this theater of beauty, hunger plays its quiet role. The dragonfish's glow is not malice. It is nature's paradox life, feeding on light, light feeding on life. In the deepest trenches where even these hunters fade, another wonder blooms: bioluminescent bacteria that live symbiotically on the bodies of other creatures. They form constellations across the skin of squid and fish, inhabiting special organs that allow their hosts to control the light's intensity. Some species can dim their glow to hide from predators or brighten it to communicate. They carry entire colonies within them, living lights housed in flesh. It is a partnership born not of conquest, but of balance. And so every gleam beneath the sea is both message and memory. Some lights are warnings, sudden bursts to startle pursuers. Others are invitations, delicate rhythmic pulses calling to mates across the black distance. Still others are illusions, false signals that lure, trick, and trap. Light in the deep is not decoration. It is communication refined by survival. Scientists have studied this glow for decades, trying to understand not only how it works, but why. They have found that over 80% of deep-sea species produce light in some form. Even in the deepest Haddle trenches, new bioluminescent organisms are discovered each year. Shrimp that flash crimson worms, that spiral in waves of green jellyfish, that explode briefly into violet before vanishing. Each species has evolved its own palette, its own rhythm. The ocean's darkness is not uniform. It is alive with invisible color. If we could see these lights together, mapped and overlaid across the globe, the deep sea would resemble the Milky Way, a galaxy beneath a galaxy. Billions of small flares blinking in patterns of life and death, an oceanic cosmos spinning silently in blue. Perhaps it is no coincidence that humans have always looked to the stars for answers. The same wonder that draws our eyes upward is mirrored here below, where life creates its own constellations in salt water. For creatures of the abyss, light has no moral, no good, no evil. It is not meant to comfort or reveal. It simply is. It connects. It warns, it invites, it sustains. The deep ocean teaches that illumination is most beautiful when brief, most meaningful when shared. In rare footage, taken by submersibles, entire scenes unfold like dreams. A jellyfish glowing with alternating rings of light, a swarm of plankton flaring in synchronized bursts, a shoal of lanternfish moving as one, their bodies creating shifting patterns like rippling silk. These sights are fleeting, seconds long, and yet they leave an impression of timelessness. Each glow is an echo of creation itself, a small act of defiance against entropy. There is poetry, too, in how this light behaves. It does not travel far, only a few dozen feet before fading. But within that short distance, it transforms the entire world around it. The water glows, the sediment shines. And for a heartbeat, the ocean seems weightless. In that moment, darkness does not vanish. It softens. It allows. Perhaps this is the secret lesson of the deep, that illumination, whether born of stars or cells, means nothing if not offered softly. The ocean's lights do not scream. They shimmer and fade. Their beauty lies in their impermanence. For us watching from afar, this living galaxy reminds us of our own fragile brilliance, how our thoughts, our kindness, our brief moments of creation are themselves small lanterns in the dark. We shine for a while, we warm what we touch, and then we drift onward, leaving faint traces of light behind. The camera of imagination pans wide, now the trench floor glowing faintly, jellyfish like comets, fish like floating lamps, bacteria outlining the contours of unseen forms. It is peaceful, not lonely. The ocean hums with quiet life, and its lights breathe with the patience of stars. We linger here a while, letting the image rest. Then softly, the light begins to fade. One by one, the lanterns blink out, leaving behind a darkness deeper and gentler than before. The last glow belongs to a small fish, drifting upward, its tiny lamp pulsing faintly. A reminder that even endings are luminous if seen with patience. Our journey will now drift toward the next layer of mystery, the creatures so deeply adapted to this world that even light has left them. The faceless, the unseen, the beings who have become one with the black itself. Their story awaits a meditation on evolution, disappearance, and the beauty of being unseen. There is a depth where even the notion of light becomes memory. A realm so still, so absolute, that color and shape dissolve entirely, leaving only essence, pure form, pure adaptation. Here, life has shed every trace of the surface. It does not glow, does not seek, does not even see. It simply is. These are the faceless creatures, the quiet masters of evolution's patience, beings sculpted not for beauty but for belonging. Imagine descending once more, drifting past the glowing lanternfish, past the faint embers of bioluminescence, until not a single spark remains. The water is ink, the pressure immense, yet everything is calm. You are entering the huddle, twilight, the world beyond sight. And within this shadowed cathedral, life takes on forms that seem both alien and impossibly gentle. The faceless cusk eel, first discovered off the coast of Australia in the depths of the trench, is a creature that seems almost mythic. Its head is smooth, featureless eyes, buried beneath translucent skin. It glides through the water with fluid, ribbon-like movements, sensing rather than seeing. Where vision fails, touch and vibration take over. Along its body, delicate pressure sensors detect the faintest changes in current, the ghost of a shrimp's passing the ripple of a falling particle. Its world is one of pure feeling. Nearby drifts the Dumbo octopus, its soft fins spread like wings, pulsing gracefully in slow, rhythmic strokes. Its gelatinous body bends and flows with the currents. Unlike its shallow water cousins, it does not dart or ink or flee. It dances. Moving with serenity, it consumes tiny crustaceans and worms floating in the sediment clouds. In a place where there is nowhere to hide it, has learned to become invisible, not by disguise, but by gentleness. The faceless creatures of the trench live by the simplest rule: waste nothing. Energy is scarce here. Movements are minimal, feeding, slow reproduction rare. Some species, like the sea cucumber, survive on a diet of detritus, digesting the ocean's ancient rain of debris. Others, like the hagfish, glide over carcasses that sink from above, recycling the remains of larger lives. Yet even the hagfish, with its slime and eerie stillness, is elegant in its function. It cleans the seafloor, turning death into sustenance. The trench, in its stillness, depends on these unseen custodians. If we were to pause here and truly look not with eyes, but with imagination, we would see that every creature is sculpted by the same hand, the slow, unrelenting patience of time. Pressure and darkness are their teachers. Each adaptation tells a story written not in words, but in flesh. Transparent skin to save energy. Bones softened to resist crushing. Metabolism slowed to near stasis, conserving every breath. Evolution here is not competition, it is surrender. The faceless fish found during an expedition near the eastern Indian Ocean in 2017 epitomizes this surrender. When researchers lifted it from the depths, they found it had no visible eyes, no distinguishable mouth. Its body was almost entirely smooth, a pale gelatinous ribbon with the faint outline of gills. It was not monstrous, it was peaceful, designed perfectly for a world that asks nothing but quiet endurance. Indeed, trust is the deep's first law. Life here must yield completely to its environment. There is no fight, no defiance. The creatures of this world have let go of everything unnecessary: sight, color, speed, sound, until what remains is essence itself. What they gain, in return, is harmony. Among them are beings so fragile that even light destroys them. When submersibles' lamps touch their skin, they dissolve in moments, unable to withstand exposure. Others disintegrate when brought to the surface, their bodies unmade by the sudden loss of pressure. These are not failures of design, they are perfection by specialization. Each is a masterpiece of precision, made for one depth, one silence, one eternal pressure. Some have evolved features so strange, they seem symbolic. The tripod fish, for example, rests on the sea floor, using 3 long bony fins, holding itself upright like a sentinel. It faces the current, letting water bring food to its waiting mouth. Its eyes, nearly useless, sit atop long stalks, an evolutionary echo of a sense once needed, now ornamental. It does not chase, does not flee. It endures poised and patient. And then there are the sea spiders, strange creatures that look like pale geometries drifting through black space. Their legs are thin, long as feathers, their bodies barely more than joints. Yet they walk the seafloor in elegant slow motion, each movement deliberate, unhurried. Their rhythm mirrors the ocean's own vast, continuous slow. In the faceless realm, beauty is measured differently. It is not in symmetry or color, but in balance. Every curve, every loss, every adaptation speaks of wisdom, the wisdom of enough. These creatures remind us that perfection is not excess, but equilibrium. The trench, though dark, is a mirror for the universe itself. Stars form, shine, and fade. Matter compresses, collapses, and re-emerges. Here, in the planet's quietest place, the same cycle repeats in miniature. Death feeds life. Stillness births motion, disappearance becomes continuity. The faceless creatures embody this truth effortlessly. They are the ocean's philosophers, patient, silent, unassuming. The narration drifts softer still. Perhaps the deep's greatest teaching is this: that what we call loss is often transformation. In darkness, faces fade, but being remains. To watch these beings is to glimpse serenity. They do not struggle for identity. They do not cling to the idea of form. They exist beyond vanity, beyond recognition. And in doing so, they remind us how little we need to truly belong. In this way, the faceless creatures of the deep are not symbols of emptiness, but of acceptance. They are the ocean's way of saying, you do not have to be seen to be real. Modern cameras have captured only fragments of their world moments, when technology's light brushes their delicate frames before withdrawing again. In those few seconds, they shimmer ghost-like, graceful. Then they vanish back into the dark, leaving no trace but wonder. Scientists studying them often describe a strange emotion, not fear, not fascination, but tenderness. They are so calm, one researcher said, so completely at home, where we could never be. It feels like watching thought itself take form. And perhaps that is true. The faceless creatures live in a world stripped of everything but essence. They are not symbols of deprivation but of completion. They are the reminder that existence in its purest form needs no face at all. As the scene widens, the camera of imagination glides over the trench floor. Shapes move gently in the dark outlines of fish, faint trails. In the silt, the subtle shimmer of membranes folding and unfolding like wings. The silence here is not empty. It hums low and continuous with the sound of balance. And above it all, far beyond reach, the ocean continues its rhythm. Currents shift. Sediments drift. Life begins and ends unseen, unbothered. Everything belongs. As the voice fades, we rise slowly, leaving behind the beings that do not need to be known. The water lightens fractionally, the black turning to gray. Ahead lies another mystery, smaller but no less profound. The world of the invisible architects, the microscopic stewards who build the deep's foundations grain by grain. Our next step takes us to them, the unseen engineers of existence, the microbial architects. Beneath all that drifts and swims, below the slow ballet of jellyfish and the patient stillness of faceless fish, there exists a kingdom invisible to the eye, yet vast enough to bind the ocean together. This is the realm of the unseen builders, the microbial architects. They are the quiet engineers of existence, shaping every breath of the sea without fanfare, unseen and uncelebrated, but older and more essential than all other life combined. If one could shrink to the scale of dust, one would see them everywhere, clinging to the silt, to the shells, to the walls of the trench itself. Countless tiny beings working in silence. They do not swim, they do not shine. And yet everything that glows or moves above depends entirely on their endless labor. These microbes are the ocean's memory, its mind, its circulatory system. Some are bacteria, some archaea, others simple single-celled creatures that have survived since Earth's earliest dawn. Long before fish or ferns, before air thickened with oxygen, they ruled a world of stone and water. Their chemistry invented life itself. Today, in the Haddle depths of the Mariana Trench, they still echo that ancient genius, converting darkness into energy and death into renewal. They are the keepers of balance, consuming what falls from above, recycling it, transforming it into fuel for what lives still deeper below. Each microbe is a single cell, smaller than a grain of salt. But together, they form vast colonies, layers upon layers of living networks that stretch across the seafloor like invisible forests. The sediment beneath Challenger Deep, pressed and folded by unimaginable weight, is alive with them. Scientists who have drilled cores from the trench floor describe it as a world humming at a microscopic scale. Every gram of mud holds billions of organisms each, carrying out its own quiet cycle of creation and decay. Some break down organic carbon, releasing nutrients for larger creatures. Others live by oxidizing methane, breathing what we would call poison. There are those that feed on sulfur or ammonia, weaving elements into the threads of life without ever seeing light. Each one is an alchemist, transforming the dead matter of the world into the pulse of something new. To understand their work is to glimpse the elegance of nature's patience. Microbes move slowly at a rhythm almost geological. Some replicate only once every few centuries. They are not in a hurry. They wait, they adapt, they endure. And within that waiting lies the secret of the ocean's permanence. If the great whales are the lungs of the sea, these microbes are its bloodstream, circulating the essential nutrients that sustain all else. When researchers sent robotic probes into the trench to sample microbial life, they found a surprise organisms thriving under pressures more than 1,000 times that of the atmosphere, temperatures near freezing and total absence of sunlight. Many of these species were unknown to science, new branches on the tree of life. Their enzymes forged in the crushing dark function perfectly, where others would shatter. One such group, the piezophiles, literally means pressure lovers. Their cell membranes contain special molecules that keep their structure fluid under extreme weight. They are not victims of the abyss, they are its citizens. Even more remarkable is how these microbes communicate. Though they have no nerves, no brains, they sense each other through chemical language, pulses of molecules that trigger collective behavior. When one detects a source of energy, it releases signals that draw others near, forming vast cooperative colonies. In the emptiness of the trench, these tiny architects collaborate like builders of invisible cities. They work in synchrony, sharing information, energy, and even genetic material. The entire seabed becomes a living web of intention. It is easy for us on land to forget that all air we breathe, all nutrients that sustain us, owe their origin to microbial labor. Long ago, cyanobacteria filled Earth's atmosphere with oxygen. Even now, marine microbes produce more than half of the oxygen on this planet. They have shaped not only the ocean's chemistry, but also our existence. The deep trench, in its darkness, is one of their last great laboratories. A place where the oldest reactions continue undisturbed. If we could listen to them not with ears but with imagination, we might hear a slow, rhythmic conversation, the sound of life speaking in molecules. Hydrogen flows carbon exchanges, sulfur breathes. Every transaction precise, measured, eternal. The deep does not shout its secrets, it hums them. The ocean's stability, its resilience against time and catastrophe, rests entirely upon this quiet hum. To the human mind, so drawn to spectacle, microbes seem small, forgettable, invisible. But to the planet, they are everything. Without them, the sea would stagnate, the air would sour, and the great cycles of life would cease. The beauty of the trench is not in its visible creatures, luminous though they are, but in the unseen architecture beneath them. The microbial world is the foundation, the scaffolding that holds the ocean upright. In recent years, scientists have discovered microbes in the deepest layers of the crust beneath the trench miles below the seafloor. These organisms live within rock pores, feeding on the faint trickle of hydrogen released by the Earth's shifting plates. Their metabolism is so slow that a single cell might live for millions of years. They are, in a sense, immortal, a whisper of life embedded in stone. Studying them has reshaped our idea of where life can exist. If these beings can thrive in such crushing isolation, then perhaps life too exists in the oceans of other worlds, in the icy seas of Europa, the methane lakes of Titan, or the buried aquifers of Mars. The trench in this way becomes a window not only into Earth's past, but into the universe's future. The more we study them, the more we realize that they are not merely surviving, but shaping. They change the chemistry of water, control the carbon that warms the atmosphere, and regulate the flow of nutrients that reach the surface. In their simplicity lies a kind of intelligence, not thought, but equilibrium. The trench's microbes are not designing with plans or intent, yet the result of their collective work is order, harmony, and endurance. They are the architects of balance itself. Their world, invisible yet immense, is a reminder of humility. Every large creature, every fish, whale, or human, is but a brief note in the ocean's song. The microbes are the constant melody beneath it all. They do not die in the way we understand death. Their lineage flows through time, uninterrupted cells dividing into eternity. Each one carries a memory of creation, a direct inheritance from the first spark of life that ever existed. And so when we look at the trench and call it a place of darkness, we misunderstand it. It is not void, it is foundation. The ocean's blackness is dense with creation. Every grain of sediment, every drop of water, every invisible breath is part of a living machine too vast for sight. It is life in its most essential form, not complex, but complete. The camera of imagination moves slowly now, zooming in on a single speck of mud. Within it, countless tiny shapes move, rods, spirals, spheres, each pulse of energy, each chemical exchange a spark of existence. Then the camera pulls back again, showing the expanse of the trench floor, the immense undisturbed plain. What seemed still is now revealed to be vibrating with invisible motion. The sea is not dead space. It is an organism breathing through 1 trillion lungs. We linger in that thought for a moment that existence is not scale, but persistence. That meaning need not be visible to be real. Then gently the focus shifts upward once more. The microbes fade into the silt, still working eternal. Above them, shadows of larger creatures move: the snailfish, the amphipods, the ancient wanderers of pressure and patience. And far beyond, at the rim of the trench, the light of the world glimmers faintly. Our journey is nearing its return now. We have seen the deep's foundation, its silent architects. It is time to rise slowly toward reflection, toward understanding what all this darkness, this pressure, this endless quiet might mean to us, fragile creatures of light standing on the edge of infinity. Next comes the turning point of the voyage, the moment where science meets soul. We will ascend now not in body, but in thought, to ask why we go down at all, why humanity again and again descends into the unknown. The ocean does not call loudly. Its invitation is quiet, a slow and patient whisper that pulls at the human spirit across generations. To descend into the deep is not an act of conquest, nor even of discovery, but of remembrance, a return to the first stillness, to the womb of the world where all life began. Every descent into the trench, whether by wooden ship or titanium sphere, is a pilgrimage back to origin. It is not curiosity alone that drives us downward. It is something older, the desire to listen to silence, to understand what lies beyond fear, beyond light, beyond ourselves. For thousands of years, humanity has looked outward for wonder, to mountains, to skies, to stars. Yet the greater mystery has always been beneath our feet. The ocean is not an obstacle or a border. It is a mirror reflecting everything we are and everything we have forgotten to be. When Jacques Picard and Don Walsh descended into Challenger Deep, they did not speak of conquest. They spoke of peace. When James Cameron returned 50 years later, he spoke of humility. Those who meet the deep face not darkness but truth, the truth of scale, of time, of patience. In the trench where pressure folds the world upon itself, the human heart becomes quiet enough to hear the pulse of earth. There are no distractions there, no noise of cities, no race of days. The descent strips us bare layer by layer until we are only awareness suspended in quiet. That perhaps is why we go down, to be reminded of what it means to be small and eternal at once. The sea does not diminish us, it reveals proportion. It shows us that vastness and fragility are not opposites, but companions. Consider how each generation, with all its new tools, feels the same pull. The Trieste, the deep-sea Challenger, the limiting factor. Each a vessel of curiosity, built not to define nature, but to commune with it. Technology may change, but the intention does not. We descend not because we must know everything, but because we are made of questions. We seek silence to remember how to listen. The deep, in all its gravity, teaches us to wait. When explorers describe their time below, their words are often the same: stillness, humility, awe. No one speaks of victory. They speak of returning changed. There is a kind of reverence that comes from being surrounded by something so ancient it has no interest in you. The ocean does not care for ambition or applause. It endures, and when we enter it fully, we feel perhaps for the first time what endurance truly means. Philosophers have long wondered why humans explore, why we risk, why we reach, why we reach into the unknown. The answer is not adventure. It is connection. To explore is to participate in the act of existence itself, to recognize that the unknown is not enemy, but kin. The darkness is not there to be conquered. It is there to be understood. We are all of us explorers of the same mystery, how life in its improbable beauty continues against all odds. The deep ocean is our greatest reminder that fragility is strength. Everything there survives by yielding, by bending, by adapting. The creatures of the trench do not resist their environment, they become it. Perhaps in our own way, we long to do the same, to find a place where resistance ends, where stillness feels natural, where survival is grace, not struggle. For centuries, poets and scientists alike have stood at the edges of mystery, gazing into the unknown, into the night sky, into the ocean's mouth, and felt the same ache, that of belonging to something infinite. The sea satisfies that ache, not through answers, but through presence. When we descend, we are surrounded by the very element that built us. Every heartbeat echoes the tide. Every cell carries salt from the ancient seas where life first stirred. In that sense, every dive is not exploration, but reunion. To explore the deep is also to face time itself. Down there, change happens at a pace beyond imagination. Sediment accumulates at the rate of a fingertip's width per century. Creatures evolve not over generations, but over epochs. The ocean teaches that time is not an enemy to be outrun, but a landscape to move through slowly. It shows that endurance is beauty, that patience is creation. Humanity has always been restless, reaching for heights, chasing speed, inventing noise to fill the silence. Yet in the depths, none of that matters. Down there, there is no past or future. There is only presence, pure and weightless. The sea does not judge, it absorbs, it allows, and perhaps when we finally rest within its vastness, we remember that we too are made of allowing, of fluidity, of transformation, of return. As science continues to explore, we learn more each year about what lives in the dark. But perhaps the deeper discovery is what awakens in us when we look there. The ocean's calm is contagious. Its patience reshapes the way we see ourselves, not as conquerors or exceptions, but as participants in a rhythm far greater than our own. The trench becomes a metaphor for introspection. The deeper we go, the quieter it becomes, and the more truth we find. Some say the ocean is indifferent. Perhaps it is, but indifference is not cruelty, it is perfection. It has no need for recognition or praise. It simply continues, like time, like gravity, like breath, and within that endless continuation it allows everything else to exist. To understand the ocean is to understand the universe, that beauty lies not in control, but in coexistence. If we listen carefully, the sea's lesson is simple. The more we sink, the more we belong. The deeper we go, the more we see that boundaries are illusions, between land and water, between self and world, between fear and peace. The abyss is not a place of endings, but of beginnings, repeated endlessly. And now, as we rise once more toward the surface, the deep releases us, gently unchanged, in its silence, eternal, in its rhythm. The lights of the trench fade behind us, but their calm remains a quiet pulse beneath the surface of thought. What we found below was not emptiness, but connection, a reminder that even in the darkest places, life continues to glow. The ocean breathes, and so do we. The same patience that shapes the deep moves quietly through us all. Rest now in that stillness. Let curiosity carry you beyond the edge of sight into the gentle space where knowledge becomes peace. If you enjoy journeys like this, feel free to stay a while. There are endless quiet wonders waiting to help you drift and dream among the stars.